Hello, friends. So if you guys work in the service industry, if you're a chef, restaurant business owner, food business owner, hotel manager, and you want to learn how to drop 35 pounds in 4 months or less, then I'm just here with Sous Chef Matt that just made it happen. And I'm just wrapping up the tech in here. Just bear with me one moment. All right, man. I think we're all good. Matt, thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to be able to share your experience with everyone, whoever's watching this live or on the replay. Before we start talking about your experience, you want to give everyone a little bit of an introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Matthew Jensen, as Leo mentioned. I am a sous chef in Michigan of the United States. I've been in the industry for 14 plus years. Always been battling weight loss just because it's hard as a cook to not only be around food all day, but also find a healthy lifestyle outside of work. So yeah, I've always been a healthier person, but never been where I've always desired. That's where Leo kind of came in.
Before we just started working together in this program, what were the issues you were struggling with?
Issues were definitely physical. Because of the demand of the industry, I couldn't find time to be active outside of work. Diet is always a problem just because, in a stressful industry, finding time to eat's hard to begin with, and then eating the right things on top of that is not always easy as well. So finding a good diet and then learning other types of dieting other than just the mainstream things that I was aware of, because I'm not necessarily an expert on any of that.
So the mainstream diets that you were trying, they weren't working?
No, I mean, they worked for a hot minute, but they weren't sustainable, at least for me or even the industry in general. I'd always find myself looping back to my bad habits because there was nothing consistent that I was really seeing work or anything like that.
You were active when it comes to exercise, like you were kind of finding the time to hit the gym, and you were putting in the work, right? But it's just like
Yeah, I mean,
part.
I was maintaining a weight of like 250, not really like having issues with that. And I would go to the gym probably 4 to 5 days a week, maybe 2 hours at most. Like I had ridiculous gym sessions, but that was really just offsetting all my bad choices and habits during the week. So I was getting nowhere.
Makes sense. What was the moment that you realized that you needed help with this?
I mean, I've always thought I've needed help, and it's just kind of the moment was when you first reached out of your own accord. I was wondering, like, I was trying to recall how we had met before. And I think it was when I was in Grand Rapids, we had touched base. But when you first reached out, I was just like, I was curious where this would go. So, I said, why not give it a shot?
Awesome. And well, worth it. So what made you choose Hotel Fit, and not any other coaching programs?
Well, then, to be honest, around the time you reached out, I had considered maybe possibly finding a personal trainer, more actually locally, if anything, to see what I could do with a person, holding me liable, keeping me in check, to start. And that's when you had started conversing with me. I think this was back in November. We would just chat back and forth, until eventually you decided to take the time for me and talk about the program and whatnot. And I think what probably impressed me the most is, like, although I knew eventually where we would get, you never really talked about cost or nothing. You were more just confirming like how serious I was about losing weight. And to me, that struck a chord where it was more the success of your program over just making money off another client. And I thought that speaks bounds of a person more than just like running a business,
Yeah, man. Appreciate that. And when you guys started, like in your first couple of weeks, your first couple of months, what was your experience like?
It was definitely a culture shock. I had never done like fasting. Like I have skipped meals. I've done that before, but I've never like consistently fasted. Keeping myself in check, forcing myself to drink water, that's a new one for me. So there was struggles, but nothing was ever beyond actual, ability. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I struggle with willpower all the time. That's why I always had weight issues. But I found the first couple weeks into like the rest of the program to be realistically built well to adjust your lifestyle to make it more habitual for you down the road,
Did you think that was very difficult, like comparing to your expectation?
I didn't have much expectation going in. I knew I would be watching, like, I was like, it was actually like reverse of my expectations. I was fully expecting to like calorie count, set dieting things, meal plans, none of that. There was none of that in this program, which was kind of a shock to me. So when I was finding myself just eating at times of the day and not necessarily just in eating certain things, I did struggle with the diet initially. We talked about that, and I was just like, oh, I have to change what I'm doing. But once I got it down, it was easy.
Mhm. Awesome, man. And besides the weight, let's talk about first, like the physical results that you have. What were the difference between now and before you got started?
I definitely noticed in the first month or two the slimming down, like through the fasting and stuff, not feeling so bloated. So that was pretty nice. I dropped almost, I've always been borderline with like pant sizes, so I dropped that off immediately. And that was always, when you get those results, it's always exciting, and like our first checkup when we did I think the midterm, I didn't really note it. Like personally, I've never really see the results, but you always are critical of yourself. And then when we sit down and you do the side by sides and we go through all of that, you really actually see what's actually coming off of you. So that's always kind of cool.
Yeah, you were pleasantly surprised with the before and after pics.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, that's the reason why I always try to encourage people to have different ways of measuring progress, because sometimes you just look at yourself every day in the mirror and you don't really see the difference. But when when you have your measurements along with the weight and everything else, then you can compare yourself in different ways. So that's cool. So you've lost 35 pounds in total. I'm not sure if like since last week you've dropped a little bit further or not.
I've dropped a couple more, yeah.
Nice.
So I'm probably on like the 37, 38 range. Close
Cool,
enough.
man. Almost 40 then. So really awesome. And then also some 5 inches from the hips and waist and everything else. So really awesome results. But apart from the physical results, what other kind of progress have you felt in your life in general as a result of these changes?
Well, overall, like just general happiness, because it's more of like what I've always wanted, and I'm now achieving that. Like going in, having a good weight or weigh-in or something like that kind of boosts your day. Yesterday I checked and was like, oh, this is really cool. I had a great start to my day. Not that it ended great, but I had a great start to my day. Um, it's just a mental boost of like you're going in direction, you feel healthier when you think that weight's come off. Not that it hasn't, but it's just you play tricks in your mind and you're just like it helps your mood. It can interrupt, a bad day. You have a bad day the other day, but as long as you're following the process and not allowing yourself to go backwards, the results will keep coming and you'll keep striving for something else that you actually have control over versus other things that you really may not have control over in your life. This is something you always have control over. You just have to choose to believe that. And I've always struggled with that, and that's where this process has helped.
That's great. And so you felt those differences in the workplace as well?
Yes.
Like as a sous chef?
Yeah, people have noticed I've been losing weight. I've actually been talking to my office to see if I can get new coats ordered because they're just a little baggy. So I'm just like, I'm gonna have to pay for them. I'm aware of that because I'm the one that lost the weight, but that's a happy thing.
Yeah, man. The downsides of this program, definitely. But that's awesome. That's really cool. What would you say was your biggest challenge throughout the program, if you could name one?
Biggest challenge was probably the longer fasts, only because I'm like very much, I don't necessarily need to be eating, but I like to drink like pop and carbonated beverages a lot. It helps me get through my day. I like caffeine a lot. So dialing back on that was a struggle for me.
Sugary ones.
The sugary ones. And then the only other struggle specifically in my particular job is the influctuating schedule. because like I talked to you before, I'm like, I could be setting my fast from like 12 to 8, or like I'd eat my meal at 12. But then if I work until 11 at night, I don't get up until about then. So it works out great. And I'm fine with not eating for the rest of the day. But if I had to be up at 4 a.m. and get into work by 6, like waiting those 5, 6 hours were always a struggle for me. So it was a little hard to keep the fasts consistent. And I tried to schedule myself appropriately, but depending on work and what the demands were, you just bite the bullet.
So like, what was your strategy to go around to overcome these challenges?
I'd usually, since I have, not everybody does, but I have the privilege of writing my schedule. If I knew something like that was coming, I try to move my LP1s and 3s, like my 12-hour fast or my 24-hour fast, around in my week to make my life easier. So I'm not like combating things, or like, I'm fine with just like eating in a 4-hour period, ate a meal at the start of it and then have a little snack at the end of it and then be done for 20 hours. So it depends. I would play around with the fasting and just what my schedule was.
So for people like watching this, that they might be like new to fasting, or perhaps they never tried it before, and maybe they're scared because they're chefs or they work in restaurants, and it all seems a little bit overwhelming and complicated and difficult because the word fast means like you're not eating. So comparing to other methods that you were trying before, like calorie counting and trying to prep your meals and trying to keep a caloric balance, how would you compare fasting to those, conventional methods in terms of like being a chef and navigating through all of that?
Well, as one that has found other success in the calorie counting, because before I gained all the way back and before COVID, I was this weight, and that was through calorie counting. I've done this journey once before, and then I lost everything after COVID and whatever. So when I was doing that, it always felt like I was having to account for something. And realistically, who has the time to look up all the calories and everything you're eating in a day? Unless you like just eat the same thing every day. That's the only way that program works, or makes it easy. Actually, it's not that it doesn't work, it just makes it easier. This program, I wasn't like, I was doing that at the start just to get an idea of what I was intaking for my own thought process. But then after a while, I just got comfortable not worrying about it. So that's where I feel that was much more successful, in my opinion, than trying to worry about how many calories is in this drink, or like how many calories is in this plate of food I go out and order in a restaurant, because you can't even really do that in a restaurant. Not all restaurants post their calories for you to log and stuff. But I didn't think about that when I was doing the intermittent fasting and stuff, because I knew like as long as I ate my particular proteins, vegetables, and maybe a little carbs, I was set.
Nice. And what would you say to chefs that they have to taste things at work, so that it might be like thinking, okay, fasting wouldn't work for me because I need to be tasting things and making sure like everything's all right? What would be like, how have you dealt with that, and what would be your advice?
I mean, I get it. Especially early in the program, I was telling people, because people was just like, hey, you should try this. And it wasn't even necessarily a taste thing. It's just like, just try this. And I'm just like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fasting. The hardest one was telling my boss or my owner. I was just like, sorry, I can't eat anything right now. He's just like, why? And that was the whole explanation. But I'd find myself in line. The easiest method was for me just taste and spit, because you can taste things. You don't have to consume them. That's the difference. And you can still get your information from it. Like I had a vegan chef who would taste meat but then spit it back out, because he was a chef for all these people. And so he would have to make sure that the food he was serving to these people was up to his expectations, but he wouldn't consume it. You take a little balance. And it's like you told me before, like a little thing here and there isn't going to destroy your fast for the day. And now if you're constantly tasting through the day, then that's a problem.
Absolutely. Do you see yourself doing the same exact protocols in like 20 years time? You see yourself continuing that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've had so much success with this program, and I feel just better myself not having to think about when I'm gonna have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was my life before. I was just thinking what my next meal was, but here now I'm just thinking like, what am I gonna eat like today? and my one meal. And then if I have a little something later, as long as I'm not like planning on fasting the rest of the day, great. But I'm really happy with just having the one good meal and then just going about my day. And I don't feel as, pressured to balance all of my meals, and I think that's just a realistic lifestyle. And even on vacations, because I'm going on vacation in a couple weeks, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna save a lot of money because I ain't gonna be eating at all these expensive places.
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the perks, definitely. What would be your advice for people in the industry watching this right now who might be in a similar situation as you were before you started?
I have always my advice would be you have to invest in yourself as much as we're worried about things nowadays because I was worried about the financial concerns of like picking up a personal trainer. But at the end of the day, you find a way, and it's always important to invest in your own personal health, because now I'm having less pains, being lower weight, working, and it's just going to improve your lifestyle overall, mentally and physically.
Yeah, definitely, man. Cool. Matt, I know like you need to go to work shortly. You're already wearing your uniform, ready to go. To wrap up this interview, anything you want to say to people who are on the fence, potentially wanting to join the program?
What I would say is that I've had such success with this program, and you are a very accommodating coach. I had my off weeks, everybody does. You didn't guilt me through it, but you would consistently push and try to get me back on course. And through that, I've learned to keep a nice balance of there's one cheat day. Usually I give myself where I may go drink or something, but then I offset that with a workout immediately the next morning. So if you're on balance about is this worth it? Is it I don't have the time, blah, 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 blah. I work 55, 60 hours a week sometimes. I still found time. And if anything, you will have more time because you're not trying to figure out all the meals and stuff. And then the workouts were extremely accommodating. I would always do more, but that was just my own personal prerogative. The workouts were never demanding and always easy to fit into my schedule, because it's only, generally, if a normal workout would probably be 35 minutes. You can do that right after you get off work, and that's the easiest time I would recommend. So, if you're on the fence, I would say just you have to give it a chance, because if you're always just be like, I don't think so, you can't just avoid things all your life. And if it's truly something you actually want, then that's all the reason to just do it.
Amazing, Matt. Appreciate that. If anyone's got a question for me or Matt, feel free to drop them in the comments below and we will get back to you. Matt, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being a great client, very consistent throughout the program. You just follow the process. You got the results that you deserve. And so I'm happy for you, man. Let's keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Of course. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Keep being awesome. And I will see you on the flip side.